Good evening, everybody. How are you all? My goodness, it's been a long, very, very hot day. I've literally just scrambled in here as well. To be fair, it's been mad busy on WhatsApp this afternoon. So yes, all good though, all good, and I'm right in the middle as well. I've had to play around with the journal videos for this week, and because I've had a lot of different little jobs going on every day, and rather than make one video, we're going to condense it all into one feature length journal that encompasses the whole week to hopefully drop at the weekend. Now, I would say that if I had Aaron here, but I haven't, so it might get knocked on a bit later. We've already got some other stuff that we banked up that he's working on, so who knows? However, I think it's going to be an interesting one because it's been a huge week for upgrades and changes and everything here at the farm this week. I think unprecedented, really. In that kind of regard, I've been playing around with the new filter, fluid beds all running on that. I won't give too much of it away, but it's nice, very, very nice to see. And the fact that I'm on top of all the growing ponds, there's no selections due or anything like that, has allowed the time to move onto there. And having Jacob with us as well, the young lad, now obviously helping out around, it's just allowed that bit of capacity within the team. So it's absolutely amazing. I hope you're all doing well. I say it has been a hot one. We're going to have them big spike in pond temperatures again. So it's absolutely crazy. Just a quick one, Carl, asking if deliveries are going ahead. Yes, I've touched upon this before. We go to a lot of preparation when it's warmer. It's not even been that excessive, but the prep that we've got right now, we've had fish go out today. I mean, from the moment of packing, they've been in here in the air conditioning as well. You know, every little bit every precaution is taken. So there we go. I hope all your ponds are doing well for a start, and that question really is what brings us on to tonight's episode. So this evening is going to be a special edition, if you like, episode 118, but the sole focus and the only thing I'll be answering any questions on throughout all this is bacterial outbreaks, because I have seen far too much of it around in the Telegram community, people mentioning bits. I'm sort of wondering what the hell is going on, in all honesty. And I've actually, from some of the guys on WhatsApp today who's DM'd me, sent me in some really useful insights into what they've been going through. Some of the stuff I'm hearing, again, makes me a bit alarmed. But from what I've had feedback from 3 people today, 4 people actually, but in 3 cases, there's something already. I'm quite good at picking out patterns in stuff. I see the patterns, investigate, and that's where a lot of learning comes from. And there's something in there which might be a potential route in all this, because it does, unless you guys are sort of out there buying from some very dodgy places, which is a great way of introducing it. It's going to be, it's a bit of a hard one to fathom out. Again, if you look at the whole kind of route and chain, it's not something I see really happening in Japan. A couple of breeders who used to be high risk no longer operate, so they're not even in the scene. It's crazy, but I think there's just a lot of information, and a member of the community who reached out today to share his experiences, now he's on top of it, said a lot of stuff. I have touched upon this in various different videos. I don't know where they're located, but there's a process that needs to be followed in this, and prompt action needs to be taken. And there's also a scary amount, from what I can only gather, is antibiotic misusage, which won't be helping you guys, especially in the long run as well. So we're gonna dive into it. I'm going to go through. If you're out there and you've been suffering, if you can take the time and fire in some information about have you overcome it, are you right in the middle of it? The main thing I want to know is just around when it started and any potential trigger events, because like I say, that's the sort of pattern that I've picked up on today. So just to reiterate again, no more questions tonight on any other topic other than this. I do just want to state, right, obviously I am no fish vet. Everything I'm going to tell you from this comes from, once again, not only first-hand experience, but the amount of people I've helped over the years overcome these problems. When I got bit of, I mean, it's probably, I can't remember when it'll be. I bet we're getting on 18 years plus. Maybe it might be 18 to 20 years since we got hit with this big time. In fact, it'll be longer. In fact, let's share that bit. So, because I think it's important to just, as well as a community, be aware that you're not alone. You can get hit with this stuff, and it's devastating. It's really devastating, with mortality, but damage that can be left behind from it all as well. It's heartbreaking stuff, and they're incredibly complex and hard to phase out as well. So it was only a couple of years after a couple of the greenhouses here have been here for a long time. They were there to support my dad's aquatic shop back in the day. And then they've gone from there. They've been retrofitted, done all sorts. But back in their earliest days of running on multi-bays and alpha grog and stuff like that, we got hit with a period. It was so early on. I mean, me as a koi keeper, I literally just started. I was learning, and I think it caught me dad out as well with this. I remember we'd grow a lot of fish on successfully, and one kind of autumn winter phase, Costia hit us, and we weren't familiar with Costia at the time, as we'll get a lot of hobbyists. We were missing it on the microscope, and when we eventually got to diagnosing it, a lot of fish had already been lost. And we was at the point where it had ripped them to pieces, and we were into the bacterial phase of it. So what was left was just being destroyed. So we've got elements like that we had to work through. And even back then in these days, actually getting hold of antibiotics, because we had a relationship with a local vet, it was easy just to ring up, say, need this, whatever it was. And that actually progressed over time. I still remember one of those ponds one year, we'd grown a batch of fish great, that went through winter great. As it come to spring, netted it up, these things were buzzing around, looked fantastic, flipped the first fish over, and it just nailed into the base of the pelvic fins, and really, really nasty. And then you just started flicking over more fish, and the problem was, it was clearly, within the population. And just things we did at that time, for example, of having a clean pond next door, taking fish out that were healthy, doing nothing with them apart from moving them to a new pond, completely fresh system. Guess what happened? The problem went with the fish, and boom, that just spread. It just went with them, and the problem continued there. So straight away, kind of first number one tip: if you suspect you have a bacterial problem, and we'll get into what defines a bacterial problem. I'm going to write that down, because there's a difference between full-blown bacteria and a fish having a couple of raised scales. Massive difference. And it just spreads. So biosecure and lockdown is your biggest thing. And by lockdown, nothing goes in and nothing comes out. That is key, because going out, you're potentially moving a problem. Coming in, you're potentially feeding a problem as well, and that's as big an issue as the problem itself. So yeah, we went through all that. I went through phases of targeted injections on particular fish, also very problematic. It kind of got them healing, and then as quick as they're healing, things that were minor you didn't think needed were just all popping out and exploding. It was pure fucking carnage, to say the least. So when you've been through something like that, you really do carry the scars of it. Back at that time, we had to figure our own way out of it, and we did eventually. And it was a blanket course of treatment. I referred to a couple of books back then that I followed heavily. Koi Vet, is it? Dr. Eric Johnson from the States. One, massive respect for the information he's put out over the years. And I hit this at the time with what back then was a course of PP that frightened the life out of us, and then actually followed on with antibiotic injections in every single fish. Sick, showing symptoms, showing no symptoms. Every single fish got hit with the antibiotics. So that was a crucial part to try and stamp it out. So I think probably the first place to really start with that is the fact that what actually determines and defines if it's a bacterial infection or not. So if you've got a few flukes and that might cause, you know, a little patch of raised scales or something like that on a fish, maybe 2 fish, that's not a bacterial problem. That is simply cured most times in a good healthy system by getting rid of the flukes, and the problem will correct itself. Has a fish scratched itself? Normally when you've lost a couple of scales, it's gone a bit red, or it's actually rubbed a bit of its mouth. When you need to be concerned that it's actually bacterial disease, you will get a broader amount of the population. You will start to see skin opening up. A lot of the different hole diseases, as they're known in Japan, will target mouth, base of fins, pectoral, pelvic, anal, starting to knit into the dorsal. A split fin with a bit of redness that will clear in a day or two in a healthy system is not a fin starting to be eaten away. Full-blown bacterial disease, that fly is going to drive me mad. Full-blown bacterial disease will really, it will eat at bone. It is incredibly, incredibly destructive, and it moves very quickly. Now, if you suspect, we're going to start with course of action on this. So, always first thing you should do is trying to understand the cause, because if there's a root cause there within the system, we do need to eradicate that as quickly as possible. Root causes could be if you've had, and I've seen this with a guy I've helped out over the course of this year, I believe went away on holiday for a prolonged period and costia set in. So obviously that's devastating, but that was just clear. That was the trigger, it was the cause, and bacteria came as a secondary problem to that. When it's in and it becomes the dominant bacteria in there, you've really got to work hard to tip those scales at that point. So that defining it's really understanding, how it's hitting the population across the board. Triggers, it could be that you've got, and I've actually noted this in a video today because I had a little bit of debris in the bottom of the new filter system, and I was kind of quite sarky with it, in the sense that having a bit of waste in a system is not a bad thing, because in a healthy system it's not a problem. It's just that when big amounts of waste are left, and it tends to turn a bit, you start getting the smell of sulfur and stuff there, and it goes very nasty. That's an anaerobic mess that's just going to ruin that water. It's going to help the bad bacteria groups dominate, and that's what you've got to really pay attention to. So over the years, days working in my dad's shop, that was a common cause, because people didn't understand about flushing out those systems. Today's modern systems, it's not likely to happen as much, although there's still a huge amount of multi-bays in circulation. But a build-up of that waste that does turn and goes bad, goes nasty, can be a source. And literally, you've already created the problem. It's there. You've got to deal with it and tip it back. But you also need to get rid of that stuff in order to fully recover the system from it. So, yeah, that's understanding one potential root cause. Obviously, from big parasite problems, it can come because of how damaging they are to the slime coat. Flukes themselves carry one of the strains of bacteria, so they eat away the slime coat, they leave the bacteria there, and obviously then it's exposed and it can open up. And then obviously stress, stress is a massive trigger in all this as well. So what might a potential cause, you might have an environment that's maybe tipped in a slightly anaerobic matter that's gone favorable in the bad bacteria groups, but the fish's immune system will be fighting it. And if you've got good water and a good environment, you might find that they actually manage to suppress it and keep it at bay. Most of us would never know. Now, the problem comes if you get a huge stress event or a trigger like that. Maybe you get an incredibly bad batch of flukes that damage the slime coat, added to the bacterial load, and then bang, before you know it, one starts, and then it's just a knock-on effect from there. So there's all the potential triggers in all this. Heavy metals, if they are present in the water, will be one of those factors that, the fish are already weakened. So, take a system where there's no metals exposure, the fish are in there. That same fluke problem, theoretical fluke problem, once cleared, might cause no issues to the pond with no metals. All of a sudden, the pond where the fish are living in heavy metals, boom, you've got a mass bacterial outbreak. And it's very hard to actually stop it and cure it in a pond where you've got heavy metals, because the fish are so weakened, it's hard for them to recover from the state that they get into. So it's another thing you always want to eliminate. If you get one, understanding your water and any potential metals in there as a cause, and also a cause for prolonging the problem and stopping healing happening properly as well, wants to be looked into. There's a lot more guys joined us now. So yeah, tonight's episode is only about bacterial problems, guys. Any questions? I'm going to get to them at the end when I'm done, because I don't want to stop my flow. We'll get to them after, but yeah, only questions, and that fly needs to die. Right, so yeah, there's root causes around it. Obviously, importing a problem is a very obvious one. If you take a fish that's been around water or had exposure to it and move it into your pond, there's a likelihood is, boom, there, you've just spread it. Depending on your environment will be how quickly that could all just blow up there. That's why it's incredibly important that you understand the sources of where your fish are coming from, and that you're not bringing that in. If you've got a problem in your pond, or even elevated levels of bad bacteria, and your fish are suppressing it and they're actually living with it because their immune system's dealing with it, and you bring a fish in that is from an environment that it's got no immunity to what's going on in your water, that can also be a catalyst to the problem, because it goes in, it hits it like a bullet train's gone into it, and it's just ultimately a food source that the bacteria can just go at, bang, and that can actually be the thing that tips it all out of whack as well. Crazy amount of stuff can be triggers for it. The one I'm going to point out today, which has seemed, and I might get a bit lost with all this, but I'll try and tie it in as much as possible. 3 people, all who suffered badly. The common thread in it all is the fish have been introduced to new, fresh bodies of water. Now, in that, it's either been that they've, one was a temporary pond set up, and it was filled with fresh water, and the fish were moved from that environment to there, and then back, I believe, once the pond work had been done. I think one was a completely new pond and one was a pond renovation, but either way, the fish have been moved from existing environments into fresh bodies of water. Now, one of the things this leads on to, and this is just what got me ticking there, because straight away I've seen 3 problems, and the underlying kind of thing there has not particularly been new fish or anything like that. It's been these big moves. Now, you hear me talk a lot about ecosystems and how I don't like to interfere with my keep it simple approach. Is to let the ecosystem do its thing, interfere as little as possible, make sure my water isn't rife with bacterial problem, heavy metal contamination. And then, even knowing that is as little fresh water in as possible, and let the environment do its thing. Good regular maintenance, so we're not getting huge shit build-ups, and job's a good one. Because what we want in a pond is that equilibrium. And we're talking here, we're getting the good and bad bacteria both exist in a pond, mainly at all times. You'll get it. But what tends to happen is there's only ever one dominant group, because the food, so whichever one has dominance over the food source can be many different things, is that good. If good dominates, it dominates the food source, it ultimately suppresses bad. If the scales tip, you get the exact same effect the other way. So what we don't want in all this is to potentially damage that balance. Now, things that can damage that balance, and bad bacteria are very opportunistic. That's an important word. Any opportunity they get, they will seize it to try and become the dominant group within your system. Now, with several different things out there people use, chloramine T is a big one. I try and avoid using chloramine T at all costs, even if there is a bacterial problem. There's other methods that I prefer, but chemical dosing in general will kill bacteria and harm bacteria. Formaldehyde, which is in a lot of chemicals, potassium to some degree, a little bit different with PP, but you will damage some bacteria along the way. Chloramine T it just levels anything bacteria. It doesn't discriminate. So you imagine you've got a system where, good is absolutely thriving, bad is suppressed. all of a sudden you go chucking in some chloramine tea because you think, oh, you know, that fish there has knocked its lip and it's got a little, it's actually not bacterial. Or regular dosing of Virkon like people do, and other things in the water that cause these kind of issues. Sorry, that people add on a regular basis thinking they're doing good, keeping bacteria down. But the more chemical-based ones, you've got to remember, will take out good as much as they will bad. So I want to focus in on chloramine tea because it's a nasty one for it. You've got this healthy environment, you start just bombing chloramine tea at it for whatever reason, and you level everything at that point. Which group's going to come back first? Now we know the bad stuff's opportunistic. So there's a chance in that scenario that all of a sudden it becomes the dominant one. It becomes the dominant force, and you start getting these elevated levels. And then all we're waiting for is a trigger amongst the fish population to really let that bacteria seize that opportunity, and bang, it's into a massive food source and it's all kicked off. This is why I'm not a huge fan of doing anything like that on a regular basis. Treating the water to lower bacteria levels, you don't need to. If you're going to do anything like that, the thing that you want to be doing is dosing with a good bacteria. There's a lot of different ones out there. Colombo PSB is one I highly rate and I've spoke about a lot. There's other forms of lactobacteria now as well. And the whole concept behind all this is that you, by using these good ones all the time and on a regular basis, if you want to use something, in my mind, a good healthy system, well maintained, should be enough with good water and a good incoming water, should be enough to keep that prevalent. And certainly is the case for me here with everything. But if you feel like you want to be using something for that certainty, and again, so we're not killing everything off. What you're just doing is encouraging the good bacteria and overwhelming the bad with the good. That's the general concept behind all that, rather than using something that will knock out good in the same process. Virkon will be the same. It's not as bad as chloramine tea, but you will catch some in the process. So I am not an advocate of doing all that shit on a regular basis. I think you've probably gathered that now over time. And it's not something I recommend that you guys do either. That aside, so that's the thoughts on that one. Not really sure if I missed anything. In fact, what I'm going to do, let me just make a note here, because now we're going to get on to obviously what happens if the shit hits the fan and, oh God, I have got a bacterial problem. So let me just make a note. I'm just going to look over your guys' questions before we do that. So that's just a few do's and don'ts bits, potential causes so far. But like I say, I like to protect and harness and look after this ecosystem as much as possible. It's a reason I love fluid beds. It's a reason I love K1, because it's been shown over the years, you know, this delicate ecosystem that lives within the K1 and what it does for that whole pond environment. Is this not the point of filtration, to create this ecosystem? Because otherwise we've got a mud pond. And it's just this level of interference, I think, at times, and also possibly through additives and other chemicals doing more harm than good, and sending the system into a spin in a place that it doesn't want to ultimately be in. So, right, I'm going to have a quick fly through the comments. While I'm doing that, if you want me to just run over anything on that bit so far, go for it, and then we'll move into the next bit, which is going to be how to twat that fly. Next bit, in all seriousness, is obviously what to do if, you know, despite whatever it is, you've got a bacterial problem. Where do we go from there? Right, just forgive me, guys. I'm not going to run through all the good evenings, but good evening to everyone again. If you are just tuning in, because the numbers do climb up over time, we're having a special on bacterial outbreaks this evening. So any questions that you've got, I want only about bacterial problems. That's all I will be answering this evening. Let's just have a look. And I'm just flying through trying to get bits on that. Yeah, so there's also bits and bobs, to be honest with you. Unless anything jumps out, we'll get touched upon in this. Can they catch it from eating their own feces? Not that I'm aware of, Chris. It's not something I'd ever put down as a. I don't know. There's science behind it. I'm not going to say I do know, but I'm sure I've had plenty of fish over the years attempt to do that, and it's never been at the end of it. Right, Anne's got a good point here, which I'm really going to tie into. It's just blatantly there asking, do you recommend Bacterial or enrofloxacin? It's actually both the same things, Anne. Enrofloxacin, I can't ever remember it, is just the generic name for the drug. Bacterial's a branded version of it. Paul, what's going on there? Anyone to buy my koi collection? I'm taking up knit. I'm sure over your years, Paul, you must have encountered similar, mate. Obviously, within the community, we get a lot of new people as well. And unfortunately, I do say this stuff, it's what makes you stronger as a koi keeper. You know, just as I'm reading through, one of the big things I fucking hated over the years, especially when I was younger, the condescending turds that you'd come up against, especially koi society larks all around that scene. You start to see where some of the content comes from. Is I've been keeping koi for 30 years. Right, fantastic. What have you actually encountered in that 30 years? Because we all know the stories of the guys who've kept koi for 30 years and never had a problem. Well, in 30 years, they've learned the grand total of absolutely fuck all, which to me is no good. For me personally, I've grown to where I am in koi keeping from hands-on practical experience and having just about every problem, probably myself. Then luckily I've had a huge amount of customers over the years and everything, cases I've been involved in to feedback from. So yeah, it's a big one that I can't remember how I started. Oh, that's it, mentioning that to Paul. But yeah, over that time, you know, you'd like to think you've encountered lots of different stuff, and that is what makes you stronger as a koi keeper. Trust me, if you've been through a bacterial problem, you come out the other end of it, you will never make that mistake again. And if you stay in the hobby, trust me, you will never make that mistake again. Good question here from Marge is even. I get confused with all the names. Clay is actually one of the benefits to clay, because it's a flocculant. One of the things it can, obviously it clears them particles, excessive particles out of the water. It can help clump them together for the filtration system to clean it. But all those particles in the water are potential food source for that bad bacteria in that opportunistic state. So yeah, regular dosing of clay can be fantastic for the system, although not a particularly strong one. There we go. Look, Paul, I knew it. Kept koi for 50 years, killed hundreds, and been through every disease going, and still here. That is exactly what I've just said too. Luckily, Paul's not in that club that I've just referred to. But yeah, absolutely gone through it all. And Marcus there pointing out, can you really call yourself an experienced koi keeper if you haven't gone through a bacterial problem, come out the other side? Exactly. You have to learn from this hands-on stuff. Luckily, with more modern systems, I would say it's probably less prevalent, because even the likes of a Nexus in its general nature keeps a lot cleaner than a fluid bed would. So bacterial problems being caused by such things as these huge amounts of waste left are probably not as prevalent as they used to be. And certainly now with drums, I mean, it's going to be very hard to ever get that level of build up to such a degree with what you're taking out of the water, and even more particles being taken out of the water. But I do think there's an element for me of the whole bit of you can keep a system too sterile through different techniques, albeit ozone or whatever it is, because how much good, and I'm not saying that I'm not experienced enough with ozone, it's just a generalization. This comes back to, like I say, dosing with the likes of Burcon and things like that. How much good actually gets killed off in the process, because we rely on the good to keep everything in check. Right, so let me just have a swag of water. You've got a bacterial problem. We know it's a bacterial problem. You've got a lot of the population with severe, maybe, you know, wounds that are puncturing, breaking the skin, attacking the mouth, the tops of the fins, you know, severe redness. What do you do? The first thing I'm going to tell you don't do, because this came up a lot and I've seen this, acroflavin is about as much use to you as a chocolate fire guard. To generally, and that's serious with that one. It's a mild antiseptic. It's good for kind of just de-stressing skin a little bit. You know, if you brought fish back from a show or you've had some new arrivals, anything like that, acroflavin is good for it. Half of the time, the general stuff in the bottles isn't strong enough to do what acroflavin really can do when you get it right. So that's going to do diddly squat. Salt is actually going to generally do diddly squat to actually stop the problem. What salt does is obviously aid the osmotic regulations. That body's being attacked and put under stress. You reduce stress by supporting osmotic regulation with the salt. That's what that's there for. I ain't ever managed to stop a bacterial problem by using salt to actually stop it. So that's no good. General things of actually hitting the water is where you really, really, you know, at this point, disinfection is an important part of it, but just hitting it with acroflavin is not strong enough. It's not going to do it, and most other things out there aren't. So the process that I'm going to go through or tell you to go through, this is the process. And I'm going to apologize to you all now, actually, because we didn't get the documentary out, which obviously is massive for this. It just caught that batch between my season getting chaotic, Aaron leaving, but I'm going to have a chat with him, get a concerted effort to get them last few bits done to put it out, because I think that will be inspiring, helpful and everything. But obviously we've got this video for it today. And this is the process that I put that pond through to get it out the other end. We start with water disinfection because you've got to attack this bacteria. We've got a full-blown infection. We need to understand what bacteria it is before doing anything. And we need to start disinfecting the water to get the levels down in the water. So real first steps are you need to get diagnosis done properly. If you think you can just beat this by randomly throwing some chloramine tea in or some acroflavin or randomly getting Bacterial, here's a big point. Getting some Bacterial, I've heard that too many times. I've managed to get some Bacterial and jabbing that into them. Let's say we'll get onto that one, but your chances, yes, doing that will be better than doing nothing, but the actual chances of properly killing it and stopping it at pace, you're actually probably just wasting time, potentially prolonging a problem, and in the process building some antibiotic resistance. So you've got to be very, very careful with that one. First steps for me is diagnosis. There's loads of people out there that can actually, even vets that aren't particularly experienced with fish, can help get swabs done to diagnose bacterial problems. Now, the benefits in going to a veterinary practice, whether it's a normal veterinary practice that doesn't specialize in fish, someone like Bryony at London Aquatic Vet, or there are other fish vets out there. I think there's a directory somewhere that if you search it up on Google, you can get into. They are scattered around the country, believe it or not. The difference is going somewhere who can just do a test. I've got a laboratory that just does testing. They can't actually then diagnose the antibiotics and do anything else in that process for you. So again, you're potentially losing time. So I'd recommend, and like with any pet, this is going to cost you, unfortunately, the minute you bring vets in. But this is what you've got to really weigh up at this point, and I mean seriously weigh up. This is where the kind of cold commercial side of me kicks in a little bit with this stuff, because for me, if I've got a lot of different things to consider. If I ever encountered signs of bacterial disease in a pond within a fish house, the first thing I would do, I would make no attempt to save any of the fish. Certainly if it was at the point, you know, where there's wounds and open wounds and it was that bad, the whole lot would be culled. That is how brutal that approach would be. Then the whole area around it system would be tracing everything, and it'd just be a biosecure lockdown, nothing out. That would have to be the course of action. Now, for me, as brutal as that sounds, obviously there's all kind of things to consider there. The potential spread from one pond to another, for one, we've got to stop. And obviously the fish getting offside instantly, it just wouldn't be worth the risk of having them there. And then instantly we would have to weigh up the cost of veterinary intervention, antibiotics, all the rest of it, to then have fish left that would have scars from them wounds. It would have no commercial value. But that aside, the commercial value, it's just not worth the biosecurity risk. The last time I come up against anything like this was a long time ago. I'm probably, this is after what I spoke about early on. The site had been clean for years at this point, but I had a batch of fish come in on a shipment from a breeder. As I opened the bags, I saw that there was the early signs of infection in the corners of the mouths and in one of the fins. Not a single one of those fish made it into a pond. They was all put to sleep, euthanized instantly. That's how serious I take that stuff. It's just, you just can't allow it. But coming back to you guys, it's very different because ultimately your collectors, these are not just fish as well, they are pets, and there's different emotional ties in it all. However, the reality might be that you have to weigh up if the costs of the proper treatment are too much for you. The routes you could try, but you might just have to weigh up if it's that severe that euthanization might actually be the best course of action. And I'm not afraid to say that that's just a reality, as harsh as what it might sound. But presume we're going down the route of we're fighting this. You need a vet to get this diagnosed ASAP. It takes time to get it diagnosed, but as quickly as possible, you need to know what bacteria strains it is you're dealing with, so you can get a targeted antibiotic and course of treatment. If you've got a vet engaged and they've done the lab work, you're going to be able to get what you need without having constant repeat visits as well. So that's that first step. Diagnosis as quickly as you can. You save time, get it done. So obviously in between getting the results of that diagnosis and actually getting the treatment that you need, you need to start disinfecting your water. So the antibiotic course, why it's so important, you could be jabbing Bacterial into these fish and they need a completely different antibiotic. What will the likelihood is, what you'll see, you might see the early signs of some healing, things slowing down. The likelihood is the minute it's hit with a bit of stress again in the pond, or it's not gone out the water, these things are just going to open back up and the whole thing goes on and on and on and on again. It's fucking brutal, honestly. But in the meantime, you've just built a bit of antibiotic resistance within to them as well, which is absolutely no good. Antibiotics as well, you must get the dosing correct. A vet will give you the recommended dose based on the problem you've got and the safety of the antibiotic. Let's not forget, a lot of antibiotics can be damaging also to internal organs if used incorrectly. So you've got to be very careful with that. And as well as that, you need to have a weight. A lot of this dosage is based on weight, and I see so few people actually weighing the fish. This can be as simple as having one of them fisherman's scales and just weighing them like that. But you need to know the weight to get the accurate dose, because underdosing with an antibiotic as well is just as bad as using the wrong antibiotic. You've got all these problems. So I think it's very important at that point you get that veterinary assistance as quickly as you can. Get the diagnosis, the right antibiotic. It could be that they recommend it orally, because the issue is, I'm a firm believer, and I don't care what they say, you need to be getting the whole population hit, because that, from my experience, if you don't get the whole population hit, you might start healing the healthy ones, and unless you've got the bad bacteria down in the water fast enough, it's likely that the others are potentially carrying it and they're going to pop out. I like a blanket approach, and it might be a mixture of oral antibiotic with injections on targeted, specifically bad fish, but I think you need that level of approach of a blanket treatment to really get it phased out. So that's my recommendation with that. While we're on that topic, like I say, it's tough. You guys have to do what you have to do, but just going and getting Bacterial off a pal or whoever you can, some dodgy fucker selling it at a marked up price so you don't have to go to a vet. When a lot of these swabs come back, Bacterial is so popular because there always generally tends to be some sensitivity to it. A lot of these bacterial problems have some sensitivity to Bacterial or enfiloxin, whichever one it actually is. So you can use them and you might see some results, but you might not necessarily phase it out. And it's not for all strains. It just tends to be one that does show up a lot, but not even when it does show up, not necessarily the best cause. And don't forget, with some swabs that come back, there can be multiple strains of bacteria that need targeting as well. So hence the reason why I don't recommend just firing it in, because what you can end up doing as well is just prolonging this whole issue by kind of stopping it, and then it's starting again, and you go back and forth. Before you know it, you've lost a full year, and it's absolute carnage. Remembering in this whole process, while you're fighting it, no fish in, no fish out. Very, very, very important in all this. So while you're awaiting your diagnosis, your strains, all the rest of it, you're hopefully liaising with your vet at this point. Water disinfection is massive, and I have 2 treatments for this. Now, I know I've said about the regular dosing of Virkon I'm not into, but Virkon as a disinfectant, I absolutely love. Now, the pond in the documentary that I didn't get out yet, that was actually a combination of the 2. I started with potassium permanganate. That video is coming very soon. And that was a blanket treatment of a very strong dose of potassium permanganate used every day for 5 days. Now, we didn't actually we got into day 3, I think it was, and we had to have a little break, because not forgetting, this does cause massively elevated levels of manganese as well. Short term, not too bad, but we just had to clear that through a little bit and get that before we carry on with the last 2 doses. Now, the transformation in the water after doing that was remarkable. But again, not forgetting in all that, you will also harm bacteria. I stopped food on the pond completely. You will harm good as well. But at this point, you've got to think, fuck it to everything else, biological filter, all the rest of it. We've got to deal with getting this bad bacteria down and try and restore some equilibrium where we get good thriving again. So that was the first phase. We gave it a little break after that, let the full system recover, get everything back on track. Feed was bare minimal, and I mean absolutely bare minimal. I told him the tiniest bit every day, because obviously at this point I didn't want to send the water absolutely wappy, because we could have really knocked it back in the filtration system as well. And then we started on a course of Virkon as well, every day for 5 days. And it's a dosage, again, it was quite a strong dosage of just the powdered Virkon that was being used, and that went in to the point where I actually got the water frothing a little bit. But the fish took it well, they went through it. At this point, how they come out looking was honestly quite remarkable. He'd actually seen signs of some of the wounds actually regressing, it all slowing down, the fish, the water, everything looking the best it had, which is a good sign. In and amongst all this, part of the work that we also did, which is very important because it hadn't been done prior to this, was analysis of the water at a laboratory for heavy metals. And I did, in that particular process, find quite a few of the toxic ones present. So we've also got to work on that in the process, because you will really slow down, you weakening those fish, you'll slow that process down. You may also find that you get a bit of parasitic problems along the way when you've got an active bacterial problem. Those parasite problems often tend to be secondary to the actual bacterial problem. Could be a bit of Costia, flukes. Honestly, you don't want to revert away from such a treatment course I just spoke about to deal with them unless they're getting excessive. It tends just to be a little bit, but don't be mistaken that they're potentially the problem. If you've got a full-blown bacterial problem active, it's likely that they are just secondary to that. And if you're hitting them with that PP course, I mean, that's going to pretty much wipe it all out anyway. And we want to be careful. This is the weird fucked up thing in it all, not to over medicate. That sounds like a massive thing there, but that is a dedicated period of time to try and completely level that environment. And then when that was all finished, we actually at that point got dosing with good bacteria, started tending to the metals problem. And at that point, we had information back from the lab and antibiotic dosing started. And if I remember right, it was a two-pronged attack with the oral and some injections on the absolute worst fish. That there is a treatment regime that has worked time and time again now. People have helped out recently. Another case I spoke about earlier in this video, it got it stopped, it got it done. But it's not, even that first course of antibiotics isn't guaranteed. This is why it's important to have that vet engaged so they can help pivot and adjust that treatment plan as necessary. coming back to it, things that won't work is just throwing that acroflavin in the water, salt, topically trying to treat the wound. Now, with a targeted approach of you've disinfected the water, you've got antibiotics in, if you are lifting fish out to do antibiotic injections, it's very worthwhile, obviously, cleaning them up. The biggest thing for me with that is just removing dead tissue, because when you've got dead scales sat within a wound, it's like us when we get a splinter in there and you don't remove it, it all goes red and horrible around it. Until you get that splinter out, it's no good. That's the scenario with dead scales, but it doesn't want to be too excessive, because remember, every bit of every bit of netting that you do, it's all stress events. Anesthetizing them, it's all stress events, and we obviously want to reduce stress as much as possible, but getting dead tissue away is very important. What I don't like to do is, if there is no dead tissue, you've got past the phase where you've kind of stopped that. When the healing then starts and you start getting new tissue grow, the last thing you want to be doing at that point is netting them and potentially damaging that and breaking it. Even worse, chucking stuff on top of it. Now, the only things I use, if it ever needed or ever recommend for, even if it's just slight, a few raised scales, bit of abrasion, stuff like that, I tend to do nothing. But I've got a fantastic treatment that I don't think is commercially available, and I don't know all the ingredients, but two base ones. It's a bit of malachite, and I know there's propolis in there. Propolis is very, very good, and actually the ozone gel that's available on the market is very good as well. There's another, iodine. Iodine, I think, is a fantastic one, but this is only at the point where we're getting over the worst of it. It's after that as soon as the dead tissue has stopped, the dead scales have stopped, I just want to leave well alone, because hopefully at this point we're actually truly in the healing phase. We can move on from there. So that is me dealing with that process. And then, fingers crossed we get to a point. Temperatures here can be quite a tricky one, or not a tricky one, quite important as well, because a big ramping temperature, if you've got an environment that's on the edge a little bit, big ramping temperature, as much as it accelerates immune system, it accelerates, good bacterial growth, it accelerates bad bacterial growth as well. So kind of getting the right bit is, the right temperature is really important to get that sort of immune response that we need, but not encourage the bad bacteria too much. So sometimes for me, keeping it a little bit cooler can be quite beneficial. Sort of 18 to 22 degrees can be a decent compromise at that one. And then when you're over the worst and really into the healing phase, warming it up more will help accelerate that part of the process as well. So that's really that all, as much as I can give you in that. There is a process in there you can take away that can help combat this problem if you're having it. If vets are really not an option and you really just want to combat it, then the treatments I've spoke about. So I've just seen a question come up there. Good point. Be careful what you put on as a topical treatment. Some I've seen over the years have caused more harm than good, because they're just too aggressive on open skin. And even on a slime coat, we want to look after that slime coat. We don't want to damage it, and adding too much on the top of it can be very damaging. So hopefully, you're at the point where you've got everything going in the right direction. Now we're still on a biosecure lockdown at this point. No fish in, no fish out. Now, theoretically, we're further down the line. You've had no signs of new infection. Wounds are healed up. While ever there's any signs of an active wound, do not put new fish in. It's honestly one of the worst things you can do. And we're at the point, but you've got everything healed up. We're looking good. You think, right, I'm over this now. The environment's back. Things are settled and calm. Your next steps now, it's almost like you're re-quarantining your whole collection. At some point, you're probably going to want to put a new fish in. And realistically, to know you're truly over it, you need to. But I think personally, after that kind of period where you think, right, everything's healed now, we're on the right track, you need to give it at least a month to 6 weeks. After that, of just nothing, reconditioning them fish, let them get stronger and stronger and healthier. If there is any heavy metals problems, hopefully you've got top side of those as well. I won't go into all that right now. As Joe said, he wants to lighten the mood, but this is serious stuff, Joe. There's a lot of people out there, mate, who are struggling with this shit. And from there, you want to reintroduce. Now, don't go mad. What you need at this point is a fish from a foreign body of water that you know is from a healthy body of water. And in the documentary, you'll see this when it does hit, is what I actually sent down a couple of chagoi out of a pond. They weren't particularly great. I says, let's throw them in and see what happens. Now, if there is still a residual problem kicking around, what is potentially going to go wrong there, I've just actually forgot, is in the diagnosis part, having the water screened is also very important. It can actually give you more of an indication to having one of the fish screened, because those swabs are actually quite complex. Coming back into where we were, yeah, we've had 4 to 6 weeks. You need to introduce something from a foreign body that has zero immunity to whatever's just gone on in your pond, and that will tell you where you're at that point. You know, it could be 2-3 weeks within that kind of period, up to a month, where if everything's plain sailing there and you don't all of a sudden that fish gets hit with a problem, right, your confidence can start to build at this point that you're actually clear, but you still really don't want to overdo it. It's just baby steps over them next 2 or 3 months of adding some bits in until eventually you're all good. New introductions aren't getting hit with any problems. Old fish, all wounds are healed up, etc. And we're out of the woods. That is as much as I can share with you on it. Like I say, I am no specialist. I'm no vet. That just comes from experience. And it's a program there, a set of steps that has helped a lot of people. If I ever encountered it, I say it's a set of steps I would take. The step I would take is, as I described earlier, it would be complete euthanization. But say I was a hobbyist collector and I was hit with it, say I had a pond at home, that they are the steps that I would be going through to get that problem rectified. So I hope that has been helpful for you. I will try and lighten the mood now. That I did have to be quite serious, and I wanted to get it out and make sure it was all clear. Scattergun approaches to all this is no good. You need something concise. It needs to be targeted. Disinfection of the water, hitting the fish, blanket hitting of the fish, you know, treatment, and obviously, you know, getting that dead tissue out as well. It's very, very important stuff. So hopefully, ladies and gents, if you are going through it, my heart genuinely goes out to you. They're a fucking nightmare. It's so complex, but why the last bit is important is if you get it wrong and you're not quite at the correct phase of completely stomping it out, new fish going in is a potential new food source to kick it all off again. And you could very quickly just, you know, new food source, that bad bacteria goes absolutely wild and you're back to square one and everything's gone to shit again. That's why that's very, very important. Ray, there we go. Let's lighten the mood. Shall we talk about my aquarium addiction? Because I did share a little bit of, I've not actually got me set up that Arthur started in the garage, 10 tanks bubbling away. Well, not quite. I've got me 2 4-foots went in the other day. The Plec obsession's getting mad. It really is. I've managed to secure myself the last 6 zebra plex that I want to make me up of a colony of 10. And I've been back onto it, guys, at Pier Aquatics today, where I got my super whites from. And apparently they've got enough that I might be able to make that colony up to 10. Yeah, I really need to keep myself busy here and away from all that stuff because it's getting mad. I've been staring at the garden the other day, wondering where I could build another fish house. So, yeah, got that one as bad as the koi seeming at the minute. I will say, however, it's nice because it's helping me be a little bit more relatable to you guys as koi hobbyists in a sense, because this is really the first time sort of independently of it being anything business related at my dad's shop or whatever. Not forgetting tropical fish and all that have been a massive part of my life. Just never done it all independently. But obviously now I've started that. It's actually doing it as a hobbyist. It's amazing. I really, you know, how they're helping me. Even when it's a stressful day in here, I come plonk my set in here, make a drink and just stare at that fish tank for 10 minutes. I'm away, brings me right back down to earth. I'm sure a lot of you can relate to that one. And yeah, it's great, thoroughly enjoying it. And I am really enjoying, seeing the value of brick and mortar fish stores. I really am, because, thoroughly enjoying going out, seeing the availability. I popped into a local one the other day, and it was epic. I don't normally buy livestock from that one. I pick a few odd bits up, but they just had a delivery and managed to get a tank full of male Odessa barbs. So yeah, I did let loose and bought the whole lot. I couldn't not. Yeah, it's kind of how it goes. So yeah, it's amazing anyway. It's fantastic. Right, let me have a quick blitz through your questions. What's this shit here, Craig? I thought to lighten the mood, we could really take the piss out of Man United. Craig, we're coming. We're coming for you all this year, mate. It's happening. It's absolutely happening. I'm not quite saying we're going to win the league. Right? I'm reckoning we might mount a challenge, especially if we fill that kind of, I say little gap. It's quite a big gap in midfield. But come on. Got my first game on Sunday as well. Happy days. Carl, when are you starting Tropical Fish Sales Company? Absolutely not, buddy. I'm quite loving that one as the hobby. However, if some of the breeding plans go to plan, there might be some surplus that needs to get rid of, but I ain't getting into that shit too seriously. I think it might ruin it for me. Not that it's actually ruined the koi. It's actually managed to keep that addiction of buying new koi going really strongly. So who knows, mate? Who knows? But right now, I'm just enjoying myself, really enjoying it with Arthur as well. Martin, the PP stuff, I'm not going to get into that. I'll say the bit I'll get into right now, and the standard dose of PP 6.8 gram per 1,000 gallons as quoted on the packet. There's a bit on there that says keep it purple for 15 hours, which is the wappiest shit I've ever heard in my life. I've mentioned that before. I comfortably, over the years, have used 10 grams per 1,000 gallons as my go-to, which works for most people. Where you need to be really careful with that is if you've got, I've seen ponds in the past where that had a heavy trickle in, trickle out, so it's pretty much fresh tap water, or you've got a pond running ozone or anything like that, that can even hit them incredibly hard. The big thing with it is really how you use it and the reaction time that you get. But most ponds will be safe using 10 grams per 1,000 gallons. The stuff I'm going to go in depth about is going quite a way beyond that and how I use it. But like I say, I'm not going to go too far on that one now. Yes, mentioning there about foods with antibiotics in, the availability of them in the UK is pretty much non-existent, I believe. That's for you guys over in Europe, blessed with that one, where I don't know the full rules on antibiotics, but things tend to be a little bit more liberal in that sense, especially around Holland. I'm led to believe, things with controlled substances are generally a bit more liberal there anyway, aren't they? So that could be what we're seeing there with that one. I'm not aware of any in the UK. Yes, Mickey, that fly is annoying, mate. Completely agree. When I say oral antibiotics, it's generally it's the delivery method. So an antibiotic will be prescribed and you'll make a mixture of it with your food over a dose to feed to the fish to hopefully get the broadest distribution possible. It's not a foolproof mechanism because, there's a counter argument that you might not hit all the fish with it, but likewise, your other counter to lifting and injecting every fish is the huge amount of stress that induces anyway. So I like that combined with the injections. I'm actually working up the list of questions. So the Virkon dose, again, I need to stress it. This is what I have used and used with stuff under my control. I'm not saying it's right. If you choose to use it, that is on you. But it was actually 20 grams per 1,000 gallons of the Virkon powder I used every day for 5 days. I've actually used that myself in the past. I had a pond where fish were actually rubbing up a few scales. In the end, I noticed it was from feeding. I'm just getting patches of scales lifting up. And in the end, I just hit them with a course of that, and it worked a treat. And that gave me the opportunity to test that out. Used it since, and fish have gone through it perfectly well. Will there be somebody out there that tells me that that's going to damage them? I have no idea. But hey, let's face it, if you're in the middle of a crisis like this, the bacteria is going to do plenty of damage anyway. That is just some realities we need to look at times. When's the DIY moving bed video coming? Yeah, it's in a group that I need to film with Aaron. Like I say, we pipelined some stuff. We were filming on Saturday. So my next Saturday day with him, that one is going to be in for. So just having a flick back through, guys, for any questions related to that. But I think I covered most of it off. Ray mentioning that problems they've had was related to really bad heavy metals. And amazing, yeah, how fast that can go. Massive part. Big case I worked on, well, it'd been a while ago, long time ago anyway. It was the first time I encountered, I'm like, shit, I couldn't get the problem in this pond to heal when I was brought in to deal with it. And I'm like, wow, this is fascinating. And that's when I first got into heavy metals testing. And it was crazy. This pond had zinc off the fucking scale. That was not only in the water, he was actually making it worse with a prominent blanket weed treatment back then as well, because the pond levels were way higher, even for potential accumulation, way higher than what it was in the mains water. And it wasn't until I got that solved, I actually managed to get the fish healed. And in amongst all that, it was actually a weird feeding behavior that alerted me that there was something more going on in the pond overall. Just bits there. Look, the guys, Daz, I think Daz has been through an absolute snotter. Shifter is a mass cull, unfortunately. Yeah, it's fucking brutal. It really is when it kicks in. But say there are steps. That was crazy. So I think I kind of skipped over it. I'll go back into it now. The 3 cases of people reaching out. The bit there that I kind of missed over is that these fish were ultimately went through a big stress, introduced either they've been in a temporary holding environment, or at some point they've been introduced to a new body of water, albeit a new pond. Now, whether you've used mature media in a new pond or whatever it is, it's a blank canvas. So that you take that opportunistic stance into consideration, as well as all the stress. Even with mature filter media, you're going to go through new pond syndrome spikes still. This body of water has to become an ecosystem, and in that things can go wrong. So that I'm not absolutely saying that it is, but that to me there, just a pattern that I saw, that there's been probably big stress factors in the moving, and these new bodies of water, blank canvases, that, let's face it, the new fish could have been, kind of maybe a bit of an issue carrying, who knows. And then they've got into this pond where there's really no good or bad, and Summits has really kicked off. Or it could just be that somehow bad has all of a sudden kicked off because there's not enough good in that system yet. So a new pond syndrome can cause absolute chaos in every respect, not just with water parameters, everything going as you're trying to establish an ecosystem. It's an ecosystem. Please never forget that. So that's worth bearing in mind. And like I say, that's just a pattern that I've seen there, because it's curious to know and see what's kind of been the potential causes of all this one. So there we are. Just saying there, antibiotics in Denmark are a nightmare as well. Seems to be the case. I do get it. I don't like seeing, the liberal usage of these or that kind of black market stuff that comes up, because overusage, certainly the wrong antibiotics as well, can long-term cause more harm than it can good. But there we are, ladies and gents. That is tonight's special on bacterial outbreaks. Now, I know we're getting away with this a little bit. I am tomorrow going to schedule the big prize draw. I've about got all the prizes together in and amongst stuff. It's nuts. We just need to compile all the list. We'll get it done, and I will get that scheduled but it's going to be worth waiting for with the great big pile of stuff that I've got for you all. We're doing the one for the Dainichi prize draw tomorrow, and I think tomorrow I'm actually likely going to be live for one of our Koi Online Koi Focus sessions for an auction Matt's got up and coming on the WhatsApp group tomorrow, and a few bits getting released on the Koi Online website over the weekend. But other than that, I'm back to more, what we call it, upgrades tomorrow, really. You're going to really enjoy that video when it comes out, no doubt. And there is plenty more to come on the channel very, very soon. And again, I'm going to make a big concerted push now to get the last bits done on that documentary as a follow-on to this, so you can see that story and actually see, you know, everything I've spoke about tonight, how it was played out perfectly. There was no interruptions to it. That whole treatment plan was followed to a T. We had Bryony from London Aquatic Vet on board. Can't recommend her highly enough. And we got the job done. So that was amazing. And I just hope anybody watching this can hopefully take something away from there to get the problems sorted. Other than that, ladies and gents, enjoy the rest of your evening. I'm going to go and have one last check of the fish and get myself home before another day of madness tomorrow.